So last year I was on a degree course in psychotherapy at the University of Edge Hill in the northwest of England in Lancashire, in the town of Ormskirk, and I have studied the Yoga Sutras and the Course in Miracles for many years, and I've also studied biodynamic farming, and I often find the wisdom in the natural world and the care for the natural world. Like, we find wonderful metaphors in the myths and in the stories that come out of nature for man's deeper nature to be revealed to him. And so there was a woman on the course who was accusing me of being homophobic, and I'm not homophobic, not remotely. I was describing some challenges I had with my ex-wife and her ex-wife, and the challenges were within me handling their characters. Their sexuality was completely secondary to the process that we were healing. But there was a lesbian professor on the course, and she sided with this woman, and it was just their insecurity. Well, I wasn't projecting any negativity onto them. I was talking about the challenges of the differences in gender, not advocating one side or the other. And I wrote this letter as we were asked to sort of speak to the problem to help heal it. And it's a long letter, but it's mostly a story. And I'm going to read it here. And it's this wonderful story about the gazelle from Africa. So I'll read the introduction so you know the context, and then I'll read the story. I don't want to make this session about me, but I have something to say, and once I've said it, I think it will be clear, and I will be happy to listen. I'm not looking for special attention, but I am clear why I spoke up in Messenger last week, and what I say now can help clear the air, for I have no animosity to anyone, but I do feel threatened. My brother's dying. My brother didn't die, but he was very psychologically ill. He's my foster brother, and very depressed, and had a number of issues. But at the time, it was unclear. Like, it really looked like he was drinking himself to death. He's been in accident and emergency many times in the past few months, and I feel very threatened by certain people on this course. And that threat was real. I mean, I got taken out on that course, and I'm still trying to get the money back and to hold the people accountable for supporting those abuses. And not just the students. I'm not just feeling threatened by the students. And so I was talking to Sue Price, who was reading this letter, because she was supporting misandry behavior towards me and sexist behavior. And she was a professor of psychotherapy. I don't think those threats are about me, but are about the insecurities in others, unhealed wounds. Nonetheless, I do feel threatened. I'm reading this from a computer, so and my brother has been in the emergency ward, and I feel Westerners and humans in general are quite good at the emergency stuff. We can fix, arteries that are spewing blood and broken legs and things, but it's the deeper, more subtle stuff that is the harder thing to heal usually. But we're generally quite poor a lot of the time at the emergent stuff. And the emergent stuff ends the emergencies. When we're not in a rush, when we're more conscious, we don't run into as many emergency situations. What is emergent is the powerful, gentle magic of self-knowing. And this is what this course in psychotherapy is about. But in our culture, it's not so common. We want the guns and the flashing sirens, the fight or flight. But when you can be present and see the deeper stuff, that is very challenging, because everyone is in a rush and the biological needs and distraction tend to dominate. Does everyone know what a pained wretch is? Does everyone know what a pained wretch is? I want to share a story about a gazelle, and then a quote from the Course in Miracles. The world you see reflects the dominant ideas within you, and is in that sense yourself pushed out. So what you experience of others is merely the reflection of your own self-concept pushed out. If you see the light in others, you will only focus on that, and you won't attack their pain darkness. For to dwell on that darkness, that is the projection of the expression of your own false and unhealed self. That is, that darkness you may see in another, and so that way of looking is not healing, that's condemning. Someone else's shit is not your shit, but it is your own incongruence amplified when you grant it importance, when you see another as ill, psychologically ill. And there's two sides to that. There may be the wisdom of compassion to recognize that they're crying out for help, but there may also be the condemnation of them as less than they should be, or less than you think you are, or just less than in general, which is a belief in lack. But also, when you ignore and don't account for it, you're not sensitive to healing as a therapist. That is your incongruence amplified. You find ways to act that honors all, but that does not exacerbate self-destruction, nor will you seek to attack others. You will only want to bring them up, but you won't put yourself down in the process. Otherwise, how is it healing? My therapist in America was close to Mahatma Gandhi, and then he went on to another teacher that pointed out Gandhi was okay with harming himself. I don't believe love harms anyone, including oneself. I consider that process of becoming self-aware, self-actualizing, and awakening. And I do believe it is the focus of the person-centered approach. I was studying person-centered psychotherapy at the University of Edge Hill, or any deeper healing process for that matter. To end that pained wretch means to be able to provide the space for others to do the same. The pained wretch inside us is reflected by how we see others as pained wretches. The healing of the pained wretch is the healing of self. And it happens in here and in here. I moved from Hawaii to California to Manchester to the Wirral to Fazakerley to Liverpool in the last 3 months to get on this course. Like all of you, I have overcome tremendous hurdles to be here. Besides many, many, many other things, I've dealt with a brother whose addiction issues hide a deeper pain that I understand, and who may not make it through until Christmas, as he's blocked by my father's insecurities, which my mother helped to enhance, but which she can't help heal unless she changes. I'm very close to my mother, and I've shown her a path to heal, but she refuses to listen. And this is my perspective. Like, people can listen to you with a heart that's open, but if they're blocked from being able to hear what's talking in you that speaks to what's talking in them, if they're not ready with that inner voice to take the leap you have, they listen at a different level than you're intending it. Men and women dance together and both impact the other. Happy life, happy wife, goes the saying. Women have just as much power as men. I believe that. I don't think that your gender makes you any less powerful. And I think if we support a belief that that's true, then, the great reformers of society wouldn't do the things they reformed. That one, the name of the lady, the black lady on the bus, it's on the tip of my tongue, something like Norma Parks, but she was on the bus, she stayed on the bus in segregated southern states, and that opened the whole door to blacks sharing buses with whites, right? People that see themselves as less than can't break the mold of the fearful culture around them. And that used to be a chauvinistic culture that dominated. And on the degree course that I went to at Edge Hill, it was this kind of woke course where the apartheid was not against black people or women, it was against a white straight male, like it was me, right? Because you're less than. Who are you to have an opinion about this because you're a white straight male? And it's just the double standards are no different. It's just inflected different in different times and different eras, depending on the dominant egotistical model, which is looking for scapegoats, right? The scapegoats of earlier days were black people and women, and now it's anyone that, doesn't buy into these extremist views of left-wing ideology and the LGBTQ plus movement. I have many lesbian and gay friends. I even have a transgender friend, and but I'm a free thinker. I'm not going to bow down to groupthink, and groupthink can be very toxic. Women have just as much power as men, because there's something in them that's very, very powerful, which goes beyond their gender and their race and their sex. And their sexuality. It's something that is what humanism and the thing that goes beyond humanism, transpersonal psychology, is all about. I've gotten on this course and I'm drawn to healing, not intellectualizing. That demands intelligence, both intellectual and emotional. My interest is not remotely superficial, and I do not believe that any of you are superficial in your interest also. Now I would like to tell a story about all of us, about the gazelle I mentioned. It is from Africa. It is an old story, and the gazelle represents the meaning of the word démon. Before Christianity came along and the word was changed to demon, the word démon meant the healing spirit that guides us. I believe such spirits embody the healing journey of all. I'm speaking metaphorically. And to end the pained wretch in us means to find the spirit of our healed gazelle. The démon in the story that follows represents this mystical animal in us, this creature that looks for healing, and it's personified by the gazelle. We start with the pained wretch. Once upon a time, there was a man, a youngish man, who had wasted and lost all his savings and was forced to scratch on a rubbish heap for what grains he could eat. He was so employed one day when he was scratching, and he suddenly turned up a little silver coin called an 8. He was so delighted on discovering this that he thought of all the things he could now buy to restore his terrible hunger. And with the excitement and all these thoughts, he fell asleep again on the rubbish heap. And when he woke, he perceived coming down the lane a man with wicker cages, and he observed the man until he came close. And then he called out to him, "What have you got?" And the villagers standing around said to the salesman, "Oh, don't try to do business with that man. He spends his life on the rubbish heap scratching for seeds. How could he possibly find enough for himself and for the gazelles which you are selling?" And the beggar said to the merchant, "How much are you asking for your gazelles? Would you sell me one for an 8? And the merchant said, "Take this one, master." And the man took the gazelle and took it to the rubbish heap and scratched, and they shared the grains, and for the 5 days that proceeded. On the 5th morning, the gazelle awoke the man, saying, "Master." And the man awoke and said, "What wonder is this?" And the gazelle said, "What wonder, master?" And the man said, "Why, I have never heard that gazelles did speak. For my mother and father and all the people that I have ever met, I have never heard of a talking gazelle." And the gazelle said, "Oh, don't bother about that. But first of all, you brought me for all that you possess in the world. Secondly, I took you for a master. So you see, I can run away from you or leave you. So will you please allow me to go into that forest each day and find my food? Because what you scratch on the heap, I assure you, is not enough for both of us." And so the master, he agreed. And so the gazelle galloped away into the forest. And he came back in the evening and said, "All is well with you?" And the master said, "Yes." And the gazelle said, "I have found sweet grass to eat, and a spring of cool water to drink, and a soft shaded cave to cool me in the heat." And so for 4 days it went into the forest and ate. And on the 5th morning, when it galloped into the forest, it did not find the grass to be sweet, but it was bitter, and it could not eat. So with its little hoof it started to scratch to find roots, and suddenly, in front of it was a diamond, a huge, magnificent diamond. The gazelle said, "Aha! Now I can do something for my master, but I must be careful, or they will say that he has stolen it. I know, I must take it to a very rich man, and then we will see what will flower." And so it picked up the diamond in its mouth and traveled through the forest and galloped over mountain and over vale, and on it traveled. And on the 5th day it entered a big city. As it galloped through the streets, all the people were on their way to market with their baskets and their goods, and they called out to it when they saw the diamond flashing in its mouth. But the gazelle took no notice. It raced straight on to the palace, and into the palace hall, and across the hall, and up the steps that led to the sultan's throne where he was sitting. And the gazelle placed the diamond at the feet of the sultan. And the sultan looked at the diamond and looked at the gazelle, and he looked at the diamond and he looked at the gazelle. And then he ordered a carpet to be brought and soft cushions that it might rest. And then he ordered rice to be cooked in milk, that it should be replenished. And when the gazelle was rested and the sultan saw this, he turned to it and said, "Give me the news that you bring." And the gazelle said, Lord, my master sends to you this diamond as a gift. He hears that you have a daughter, and my master, who is the Sultan Darai, hearing that you have a daughter, sends you the small token in the hopes that you will grant your daughter's hand to him as the wife. And the sultan thought, and then he looked at the gazelle and he said, I am content. This wife shall be his wife, the family his family, the slave his slave. Let him come to me empty-handed. I am content. The diamond is like your labors and mine to get on the course in psychotherapy. This is talking to the professors who were taking sides and trying to project toxic views onto me which were not aligned with the man I am. The gazelle is the mind of your heart. Everyone's heart is beautiful, but the mind that steers it in a different place. But the mind that steers it is in a different place depending on many factors. We all worked hard and have gone into depth to get the diamond, to get this training. The Sultan's daughter is the career it will bring you. She/the career is challenging herself, but comes with many, many rewards. If you make it through, but look how many hurdles lie in the way ahead. Like, that's what you get from taking on a degree course like I was embroiled in. Lots of money to pay for, lots of time and energy to invest in, and here I was being accused of things that were false, and I was standing up to that, and I was pointing out the sacrifices that were being overlooked by the people who were abusing their authority. And one of them was the person I was writing to. Now back to the story. And the gazelle arose and said, My lord, I depart in 8 days. Oh no, it may be 11. I will return with my master, and we will be your guests. And the Sultan said, Farewell, gazelle. And the gazelle said, Farewell, my lord, and galloped away. And so the gazelle returned to the man, who he found lying on the ground, full of sadness, thinking that he had lost his gazelle. And he was so delighted he threw his arms around it and embraced it and wept. And the gazelle said, Well, we must rest now, and in the morning you must follow me. So very early the next morning the gazelle and the man set out, and they traveled for 4 days. And at the end of the 4th day the gazelle gave the man a thorough good beating, and left him lying under a bush, and galloped off toward the city. And when the soldiers and the citizens saw the gazelle coming, they ran to the Sultan to tell him of the arrival. And the Sultan came out to meet the man and the gazelle, and found only the gazelle. And he said very kindly, greeting the gazelle, Where then is your master you were to bring? And the gazelle said, My lord, a terrible thing has happened. We met with brigands on the way, and they beat my master, and they took all his clothes, and he's bruised and hurt and lying naked under the bushes. And the Sultan said, This, in my estate, is appalling. And so he sent to the palace, and had the most beautiful horse saddled and bridled and dressed and brought from the stable. And he had a beautiful robe and a costume of a sultan bride, with sandalwood and myrrh, and all of the trappings and requirements of a sultan. And then he turned to the gazelle and he said, Now you must make a contingent of soldiers, and you must go to your master and present him with these, that he may come. And the gazelle said, My lord, I cannot take all these soldiers to see my master in this condition. And the Sultan said, Well then, how will you manage? And the gazelle said, Oh, that's perfectly easy. Don't worry. Just put them on the back of the horse, and put the bridle of the horse around my neck. And I will go faster than the horse, I assure you. And so it was done, and away they galloped. And so the gazelle returned again to the man, and the man was delighted to see him. And the gazelle said, Now you must go to the river and bathe, and brighten your teeth with sand. And when that was done, he presented him with these magnificent clothes, which he put on, and was well pleased with himself. And the gazelle said, "It is towards evening, and you must mount this beautiful horse, and we must go." And so he mounted this horse, and the gazelle said to him, "Now listen, where we are going, you must not talk except to answer questions and to give news. You are now a new man. I have provided you with a wife, and we have given the wife magnificent presents. You see, there is no need for you to talk." And the man said, "It is amazing that you have done all this. I am the slave. You are the master. I will obey you, Gazelle, in all things." And he mounted the horse. And as they began to approach the city, the gazelle said, "Now, remember, you are no longer a beggar. You even have a new name." And the man said, "My father, what is my name?" And the gazelle said, "Sultan Darai." And so they approached the city. As they approached the city, the gazelle pointed out that in the middle is your future father-in-law in the sky blue suit. Now go forward and dismount and go and greet him. And so the Sultan met with Sultan Darai at the palace, and there was a great festival. And the next day the gazelle came to the Sultan and said, "My master, Sultan Darai, sends me to you that we may be wed to the wife, for his soul is eager." The Sultan said, "It is well, call the priest." And the marriage took place, and cannons were fired, and there were fireworks and great festivities. And after 4 days the gazelle went to the Sultan and said, "The Sultan Darai has ordered me to go and prepare his house for him, and so I should be away for 7 days. And my master has agreed not to leave the palace, and will await my return." And the Sultan said, "Farewell, Gazelle." And the gazelle said, "Farewell, my lord." And he galloped away over the mountains, through the valleys, over the plains, and on the 5th day he came to the outskirts of a beautiful town. And at the end of a magnificent avenue was a superb mansion of porphyry and alabaster and turquoise. And the gazelle said, "Why, this is the house for my master. Now I must pluck up all my courage, for I have not seen a living person in this town. So if I am to die, I am to die. If I am to live, I am to live." And he knocked on the great door and cried, "Open!" And there was no reply. And he knocked again and cried, "Open!" And a voice from inside, "Who is it that cries open?" And the gazelle said, "It is I, great mistress, your grandchild." And the voice replied, "If you are my grandchild, go back to whence you have come, for this is no place for you to die." And the gazelle said, "Open, great mistress, for I have something important to tell you." And the old woman opened the door, and she said, "How is it where you come from?" And the gazelle said, "All is well, mistress, where I come from. And all is well here." And the woman said, "All is not well here, for here is death, and everything is under a spell." "So how could that be?" the gazelle said. "There is much wealth here. The stories are full of horses. The stables are full of horses. The place is full of people. And they are all under a spell." To this the gazelle said, "Who is the lord of this house?" "The owner of this house is a great and wonderful servant who comes to this house every day when the sun is over the house. He keeps me here to cook his food, and I have to put out his food, and after he eats he drinks a tank full of water. And when he has drank his full of water, then he rests, and then he goes away again. And this serpent is a great and terrific monster with 9 heads. So how could you be a match for him, my son? Mind your own business, mother, and don't mind other people's. Has the serpent a sword?" And she said, "Yes, indeed, he has a sword. Indeed, it cuts like a flash of lightning." And the gazelle said, "Give it to me." And as she handed it to him, she said, "Oh, you make haste. Oh, do you hear? Do you hear? The wind is rising. Here he is in the courtyard now. Quick, be quick." And so the great serpent ate all the food and drank a tank of water, and then the first of his great heads came in through the huge hole in the entrance, and at one stroke the gazelle severed the head like a flash of lightning, but the serpent felt nothing. And 7 more heads came in through the hole, one by one, and each went rolling. And when the 9th head came in, the gazelle held it and said, "Aha! You have climbed many trees in your day, but this you cannot climb. You have climbed many trees in your day, but this you cannot climb." and the 9th head went rolling. And at that moment the sword rattled to the ground, for the gazelle had succeeded. He had killed the great serpent. And the old woman leapt and jumped and danced with joy as the great dragon was destroyed. And she ran and brought water, and she bathed the gazelle's head. And at last there was a little sneeze, and then he was well, and he got up on his legs, and he said, "Show me this mansion from top to bottom, from left to right, from inside to outside." And they went all over the mansion, and it was bewildering. And the gazelle said, "You must look after this whilst I'm away, until I bring my master." And so he rested for 2 days and galloped away to the palace. And when he arrived at the palace, the Sultan Durai was there and greeted him and threw his arm around his neck and embraced him with great joy and said, "At last you have returned. I have not been able to eat for thinking of you. I have not been able to drink for being without you. I have not been able to think. I have not been able to laugh for thinking of you." And the gazelle said, "It is well, and in 4 days your home is ready, and we will depart." And so at the end of 4 days, a vast collection of courtiers and ladies of the palace all came to join in the procession to the new home. And they journeyed over mountain and through valley and over plain, and ate all the food that the gazelle gave them on the way. And on the 5th day they suddenly saw the city. And they all gasped and said, "Oh, gazelle!" And the gazelle rushed forward with the master and the old woman who had seen them coming, and she threw open the doors, and she picked up the gazelle in her arms and kissed it. "Oh, gazelle, what wonders you've brought us." And the gazelle said, "Please put me down. My master is the one you should greet, and my mistress the one to kiss." And the old woman said, "Oh, I am sorry, son. I did not realize that this was our master." And so the gazelle and the old woman took the Sultan Durai all over the palace, and he was overwhelmed with delight. And at the end he gave orders that everything should commence, that all the people should be freed of their bonds, that they should commence, some to sweep, some to cook, some to go to the fields, others to loosen the horses in the stables, and the whole of life of the village to proceed. And so they lived in great entertainment and happiness and luxury for 4 days with all the visitors. And at the end of the 4 days, the visitors and the courtiers and the ladies in attendance said it was time, and they must go home. And so they set out and returned to the palace of the Sultan. And so, after many months, the Sultan Durai and his wife lived in great luxury and opulence in the palace, and enjoyed themselves more and more and more. And now, for a long time, the old woman and the gazelle had lived in the basement. And one evening the gazelle said to the old woman, "Is it not strange that my master, for whom I have done all good possible, has never once said, 'Where has all this come from?' and has never attempted to do the same good in the same way amongst all the other people?" And the next morning the gazelle was sick, and told the old woman to go to the master and say that the gazelle was sick. And when she went upstairs, there was a great orgy going on, and laughter and drinking, and she couldn't get a hearing. And eventually she managed to elbow her way and shout out to Sultan Durai that the gazelle was sick. So he knelt down to her and said, "Well, what of it? What do you expect me to do? Make some red gruel of millet and give it to it." And the wife said, "Husband, the millet of red gruel, even the horses wouldn't eat it." And the gazelle is not like anything else. It is the apple of your eye. And if dust got into that eye, would it not worry you? And the Sultan said, "Woman, your tongue is too long," and left the room. The old woman went back to the basement, and the gazelle read in her eyes what had happened. And the old woman looked down, and a little while later the gazelle called out and said, "You must go to my master and tell him the gazelle is nearer to death than life." And the old woman went up again, and there was noise and commotion. She could get no hearing. And the woman said, It has not eaten the gruel, and it is closer to death than life." The Sultan said, "Well, what do you expect me to do about it? After all, it's only a gazelle, and if it must cease, it must cease. And I do not do you know what worth it is? I bought it for an eighth. And the woman said to him, "Master, how can you speak of this gazelle in this manner?" And the wife of the husband rebuked her. And the husband, Sultan Durai, rebuked her and told her to shut her mouth, to shut her eyes, to shut her ears, and sent the old woman back to the basement. And when Sultan Durai left the apartment, the wife quickly collected a servant. She collected a rug and some cushions and a towel and water, and she ordered rice to be cooked with milk. And she descended and ran to the gazelle and placed the cushion under its head and bathed its head with water. And the gazelle turned on its side and quietly died. And when the people of the town heard that the gazelle was dead, they burst into tears and into lamentation. And there was a great noise of mourning and sadness. And the Sultan Durai was infuriated. How dare, he said, how dare they take this place as though it were for me? How dare they take this place of the death of the gazelle as if it were me? It must cease this morning. Whereupon the wife said, Husband, I thought that you were a man of great wisdom, but you appear to have none. The gazelle was no ordinary gazelle. Everybody loved it. Everybody knew that it was the gazelle that asked me for my father for my hand. That this town was, and this amazing castle, this palace, was what the gazelle brought us, and all the people with it. And he's given us all of these things. They knew it was the gazelle. And the Sultan Durai was more infuriated, and the people said, We are lamenting because we love the gazelle, and we knew what the gazelle represented, and that because the gazelle has died of sadness, not weeping for the gazelle. You not weeping for the gazelle, we are weeping for ourselves. And the Sultan Durai was more infuriated and ordered the gazelle to be thrown into the well at the back of the mansion. And when the wife knew of this, she sent a fast emissary to her father's palace, and they arrived with all speed. And when the Sultan heard of what happened, he wept bitterly, and he called together the judges and the courtiers and the people, and set out for the mansion of Sultan Durai. And when he arrived, he went straight to the well, which is a very wide jeweled envelopment. And he went down the steps of the well, and the people and the courtiers, they followed him. And he collected the corpse of the gazelle into his arms and carried it back up the steps. And they buried it carefully and covered the grave. And when it was done, the Sultan ordered mourning throughout the village for 4 days. And when the 4th day was ended, it was very early in the morning, and the wife was asleep beside the husband, and she dreamed a dream, and she dreamed that she was back in her father's palace. And when she awoke, it was not a dream, but the man also dreamed a dream, and he dreamed that he was on the rubbish heap scratching. But lo, when he awoke, it was not a dream, it was the truth. As I said, I believe the focus of being self-aware is an awakening, and we are led by an inner spirit of healed vitality that has all the love, beauty, and wisdom of the gazelle in the story. So I told that story to the people on the course that were teaching it, that were supporting this dream hatred and misandry. And I said, this has to stop, right? Happy wife, happy life, that's okay. But if the wife, the feminine energy, is toxic to the masculine, then a masculine that just bows down and says, okay, you abuse me, that's not okay. And that was what was going on in the course. And I think that you have to follow the deeper magi, the deeper sort of genie in the bottle of your life, to stand up for truth and not become a victim of the fearful thought system that says that men should dominate over women or women should dominate over men, and that the spirit of nature should rise up in you and you should be humble towards that and not dominate it. Otherwise you become a tyrant to self and others. And that's what I was pointing out, and rightly so, and I was crucified for that. But the story is still a beautiful story.